Hey, everybody, and welcome back to another episode of the world's #1 rated, highest podcast ever. I
You
think
like
it's
to
not
do
just
that.
the world; it's the solar system as well. The #1 podcast in the world, the Bulletproof Dental Practice Podcast. I'm your co-host and founder, Craig Spodak, and I've got my friend Peter Boulden here joining today.
Friend and hitchhiker in the process.
Chief Coattail Rider,
Chief
Dr.
Coattail.
Peter Boulden.
Thank you. Thank you
So
for having me.
this is something that's just on my mind. I want to talk to you about it because I know I'd love to have this conversation with you. And if we're going to have a conversation, we might as well record it.
Mhm.
So I just got off the phone with a friend of mine. He's a pastor here in Florida, and he was talking to me about this thing that he fears. He fears, and I think a lot of us dentists fear the same thing. We fear something that is going to happen, and it's going to be like an existential thing for us. And for some of us dentists, it might be your first negative Google review. I know you remember that well, Peter, like when you're like, oh, Dr. Bolden, I went there and they ripped me off and they told me I need all this stuff and I didn't need any of it. I went to Dr. Jackass down the road and they told me I needed nothing and, screw this place. And you see this negative review. And if you're a newbie, you say, this is the beginning of the end. This is the toilet flushing the drain and everything I've worked so hard and all the loans I've taken out. This is the beginning of the end and it's going to sink me. And what happens is there's like that meme. I'd love to pull it up, but we don't have an executive producer, Pete. But you know that meme where it's like that wolf and he's got like 50 arrows in his back. It's like, it's like a meme that shows you like, if you're going to lead, if you're going to do something big, you're going to take shots, you're going to take arrows. But what happens in business over time is that you realize you're kind of unf-withable. You realize that your business, once it's built, is a lot more resilient than you think. And you can take the shots and you can repair and recover. For those of you who are longtime listeners of the podcast, you'll remember a time where I spoke of something. And it was a pretty hard thing for me, Pete. You remember that with that employee?
Yes.
I had an employee that went rogue. I terminated her and she went next level crazy and literally went on Facebook and said that I'm stealing from her 401k and I can't afford my Porsche payments and all my custom shirts that I wear, I can't afford them. And it wasn't what she said that was so disruptive to my psychology. It's the people that I thought were in my corner and how they said things like, oh yeah, Dr. Craig, yeah, he acts like he's so nice. He does all that charity and he does free dental work and he's always like, getting all these awards. But the fact that he'd steal from your 401k to buy his Porsche, that's so upsetting. What an a-hole.
Right.
And it really got to me. It did, Pete. It was a really rough time for me.
Yeah.
And it really, I let it in. I took the bait and I brought it into my world. And I remember my wife saying something to me at the time. She said, Craig, listen, a lot of people have a storm in their house. This woman is outside of our circle, but you're bringing it into the house. You have a loving wife. You have healthy children, knock on wood. Don't bring this shit home. And I think that's an important thing because if I look back intellectually on the whole circumstance, I brought it in. I let this thing that was outside my circle, I let it come into my own house, and I suffered more than I should have. And as a follow-up, something's, not at that level, but something else happened about a year and a half ago. I don't even think I told you about it, Pete. There was a guy named Jeff in my practice, and he was doing Invisalign and then, he wasn't wearing it. And the doctor that he was seeing said like, listen, if you're not going to wear it, we have to, refine you or charge you or whatever. And he got really, really upset. And I'm like, I'll step into this. And I remember saying like, Jeff, what's the deal? Like, let me help you. He started screaming at me. I'm like, dude, you're done. You can't scream. You can't curse at my team.
He reached out to me. Remember that?
Yeah. So
on LinkedIn.
Like, so what he did was he sent a couple thousand direct messages on Facebook, Instagram, and LinkedIn, and on our YouTube. I'm talking a couple thousand saying Craig Spodak is scum of the earth. He's a terrible human being. He stole my money. And the funny thing about that was I didn't care. Like, remember I was like, people were calling me, like I had friends calling me like, dude, there's this guy who's trying to attack you. I'm like, I don't care. Like sour grapes, who cares? because I knew I did nothing wrong, and I
Right.
let him spit his vitriol and it didn't affect me. And it's a great thing if you're going through something right now. Maybe it's your first malpractice lawsuit, or maybe it's a disgruntled employee, because Lord knows there's a lot of them right now. And then I was talking to one of our masterminders the other day, and he's like, he hired somebody and then they didn't show up. And then literally he, I guess, terminated the offer because they never worked for him. And they're like, you'll be hearing from my lawyer. So it's a crazy time
Jeez.
now where people are really litigious and angry and hostile. And I just want to speak to those people that are out there that are going through something that you think is going to sink you. It won't. It actually won't. So, Peter, I'd love to hear your thoughts of things that you've been through. And
I want to double click on something you said, because I think this is good advice for old and young dentists. It's so funny how people weaponize, you'll hear from my lawyer. And 99% of people, when they hear that and they're the recipient of that, they cower. Oh shit, no, my God. But if you've ever been, there's so much more to this than like, don't let that comment, because anyone can flippantly throw it out. Like, you hit my car, you know, hear from my lawyer, you did this, hear from my lawyer. And we just shut down, right? Especially in our practices. If anyone's ever gone through from a plaintiff perspective, you know, it's not just as easy as you'll hear from my lawyer. They will have massive cost associated with it, massive headache, you know, so unless it's like legit, like they ain't going to do it, and no lawyer is going to take their case. So like that whole weaponization of you'll hear from my lawyer is such bullshit. So, you know, I've gotten out, and I think maybe this is the title of your pod, maybe Get Unf. I'm like, can't wait to talk to him. Beat it. You know, and maybe not in the practice, but when someone says it, I'm like, can't wait. Right. Because, you know, I think it's, you fight alpha with alpha, you fight beta with beta kind of thing.
You've always had a God-given talent, Peter, to have a massive amount of bravado or alpha energy.
Yeah, but some of it's fake. Like, to be honest,
it doesn't matter. But like, you know, it is bravado, and in the art of a deal, and what you're talking about is a deal being made, the alpha energy, you don't know, is it fake? Is it real? Can I trust this person? And
right.
What I think that I'm trying to land on with this segment of the pod is the following: when you believe you're unf-withable, you have a protective cloak around your business. When you actually think that you have an Achilles heel and there's an existential threat on your practice, if I lose Becky the hygienist, if I get a negative review, if that's your psychology, you're more susceptible to failure than if you have alpha energy of believing you're unethical.
Okay, but I think that comes in the life cycle of your practice, meaning you just spoke about that. I have bravado, but I got to tell you, I have had countless sleepless nights, literally hundreds of sleepless nights because of things that transpired in my practice, whether it was a lawsuit or a malpractice thing or bad review or something, whatever, you know, a disgruntled employee, whatever, like you're saying. So I think some of that comes with time, right? I think that comes with tenure of your practice kind of thing, and tenure of you just being like, look, life's too short to like bring it home, so to speak. And I got to tell you, Craig, in the instances that I just mentioned, I did the same thing. I brought them home and was not present, distracted, in a bad mood, took it out on my family potentially, right? The frustration I had maybe there, I took out on my family or wife or whatever. I mean, you know, and you're only human. You need a vent. But, you know, so I think it's a normal process, especially in the formative years. And you can't avoid it, other than having listening to someone like us saying like, hey, like, don't sweat the small stuff, and it's all small stuff kind of thing.
Yeah. And then you realize, you know, you and we're fortunate to have friends who are in big business.
Right.
And you tell your big business people, the ones that have, you know, 2,000, 3,000, 5,000 employees, you say, I have a lawsuit going on. They say, wow, really? One? Because I have 9 right now, or 14. You know what I mean? Like I remember sitting down with John and complaining, like, yeah, got this lawsuit, I'm really upset. And he's like, yeah, well, they're very, you know, it can be very upsetting. I've got 15 right now. And I'm like, oh, wow. And he's like, yeah, let's just have wine. Let's just have a glass of wine and chill out. And let's not talk about work. And it's just, when you grow and you get bigger, if your practice, if you're going to hire an associate or maybe a second associate or a third associate, you got to remember that 5% or 2% of all the patients you meet are going to be crazy or unhappy. And if you're running a bigger business, that 2 or 5% is a big number at a certain point. And I think you just get comfortable being uncomfortable, and you realize you believe in what you're doing. And then that belief in what you're doing is a protective cloak.
Okay.
I think that's one of the reasons. Let me just say one more thing, Pete.
Sure.
I think one of the reasons why when people sell, they feel better about their businesses. It's not the fact that they're getting so much back end support from Acme DSO. It's just you feel different when you have a couple extra dollars in your bank account. You feel more unf-withable.
Yeah. I think that sentiment you talk about, oh my gosh, things are going down. That's it. I got a bad review. Like, I think those are gifts, and hear me out on this, especially if you're a strategic mind, because the antidote to fear and anxiety is what, Craig?
Action.
So when you get that bad review, if you sit and cower and believe it, okay. Or you say, hey, F that. I'm going to get 50 to cover this one. I'm hellbound determined to squash this one, right? If you have a clinical situation that you can't avoid, right, that happened, and you did good work, and someone is claiming that, oh, the color, I'm taking you to the board or whatever. Okay, great. That's what I pay my premiums for. Have fun with that.
Yeah, the 3 currencies of life: emotion, time, and money. You pay with money to save emotion. That's why you have malpractice insurance.
Now, if you have done something where you feel like you have egg on your face, and this is clinical or patient experience or team member or whatever, I think where people get this wrong is we run away from conflict. We run away from sweaty back conversations. We run away from, I'll just duck and hope it goes away, right? Whether you're a disgruntled patient, disgruntled employee. So I think like just stepping in front of me, like, this is going to suck. But like, how do we fix this? Right? Ms. Jones, how do we fix this? We messed up. I messed up.
Yes.
Is there something I can do to fix it? Like, the admission of guilt sometimes is like, I'm never going to admit I'm wrong, even though I'm wrong, kind of thing.
No, I have no problem exchanging dollars for time and emotion.
Right.
Yeah. It's always the right thing to do. Always the right thing to do. How can we make it right?
But there are certain points in your life where that's a really hard decision because of, like I said, that tenure in your practice. When you're a startup, it's really hard to refund things when you don't have that cash flow. I remember this vividly.
Me too.
So I guess, what is your takeaway? Like, what is your advice to?
I guess it's the same advice that we would give to our younger selves, Pete. Is, for those that are getting that first bad review or their first major conflict, or the employees, you'll hear from my lawyer or whatever it is. Just know that we've all been there. I think a lot of the suffering happens because you feel like it's happening to you and it happened to nobody else. And I think one of the gifts that we have, like in our mastermind, is people get to learn from us and like, wow, Pete went through that. Oh, Pete had hundreds of sleepless nights. Craig had hundreds of sleepless nights. And it gives them like kind of unconscious permission to say like, okay, I am in the right place and this is the normal thing for me. So it's just like, hey, it's okay. It happens. We've all worried about payroll and not been able to make it, or had a lawsuit or impending threat of a lawsuit. It's just part of the journey of the entrepreneur, and it's normal. And it's not all roses and sunshine. There's a lot of hard work and sleepless nights. And that's
I think it too can teach you, like, you start just plotting on your journey. I'm going to open up practice and do this. I think in time you start thinking, I'm going to use the word strategic again, because you start thinking, if this, then that, right? If this happens, then I know what to do now. If I get a bad review, we know, alert the team, get 10 more. If we have a disgruntled patient, pull up this chart, make sure you document it. You start getting the skills, the muscles to deal with stuff. And you start thinking about contingency plans with everything you do, right? I always say, whenever I enter the room, I need to make sure how I'm getting out of that room. I don't want to be trapped in it. And I think I think that's an evolution of business and an entrepreneur, as you start thinking about, the things that might happen and what would I do if they do. So another instance, and there's data on this, that 90% of what we worry about never actually happens. And I can tell you, I blew a lot of time and energy and sleepless nights and stomach lining and bad moods on just that. I worried about stuff. And I think that would be my takeaway, is learning, just like, even if you echoed that statement I just said. It's a fact. 90% of what I worry about is not going to happen. I think it dampens rather, potentially being like, this is normal. I'm acknowledged that I'm a little worried about this, but it's probably not going to come true. There's a 1 out of 10 chance that this comes true.
No, it makes sense. Yeah.
And when you quantify it like that, I think it's pretty good. I think it's an interesting dynamic, right? I would say that
it's part and parcel of the entrepreneur. Your parent, it's the paranoid survive. You're thinking about all these game plans, and that's part of that neuroticism that helped you become successful was worry. What if I fail? What if I do this? Let me work harder. Let me open up more hours. Let me see that extra patient. So paranoia, but at a certain point, you have to transition. It's like Naval would say in that book. It's like you have to be paranoid and relentless to build the company. And then when you've made it, you have to somehow transition into a monk. I'd probably add one more thing to it, to the unf-withable thing that we were talking about here, is to do everything in your practice, your business life, to do it the right way. Preserve your character. Do things that make you proud. Because when people can feel how you believe about yourself, so do the right thing. If you're doing dentistry that is good quality and ethical, and it's the right treatment, and it's and you treat your mother that way, the way that that you treat other patients, that's a cloak of protection as well. So live right, do right things.
I would agree with that.
Have a good business.
And then the last thing I would say, my closing thing would be that it's okay. Meaning that dentists, if we've learned anything, Craig, from coaching hundreds of people in a mastermind, we've learned that at the core of it, even the strongest practices, they feel alone if they don't have a support group, meaning they feel, am I making the right decision? Because no one gave us a handbook out of dental school. It's like, hey, here's the entrepreneurial handbook for dentistry. So you're operating with, I think I'm right for most of your career. I think this is the way. I think I'm doing this right. I think I'm handling this right. And meanwhile, in your head, you're saying that, but going forward, you have to be the leader, the warrior, the general that is like, I know I'm right, kind of thing. And then it's hard to almost acquiesce on that.
Well, so, it's inauthentic because you're scared, but you can't tell anybody you're scared.
100%.
That's why that network is important.
Right. And so that's, we always say if yes, maybe our mastermind, but it could be a study club, could be your best friend. Like Craig, you have a lot of advocates for your success, your friends who are, that you will confide in. I think sometimes dentists don't have that because we fear that they're not going to have the right amount of context. If they're not a dentist, they might not have the same context and understand things. So they may be flippant with, oh, don't worry about that. Right. But you're like, oh, I'm worried. Right. So sometimes like having a dentist support group is the best part.
The loneliest dentist is the solo practicing dentist that aspires to become a business owner.
Amen. Because it's blue ocean for you. You don't know the next steps.
Right. So you have your dental study club, which can help you with the matrix band and what it should use expansile or should use retraction cord, but you don't have a business mentor. And that's the hardest time in a career when we're doing the dentistry and trying to moonlight as business owners.
Amen. And that's why so many people, Craig, they'll maybe be directionally correct or maybe not even directionally correct. They'll step off into that and then they'll get taught a hard lesson. And they're like, nope, not going to do that again. Let's just, everything's good where it is. I'm happy. I'm good. I'm happy with one. I'm happy with doing 500,000 a year or whatever. Well, I'm good with this. And the narrative becomes, don't do that again kind of thing. As opposed to, like Naval says, luck transpires in one of three ways. You can just be born lucky kind of thing, or you can stir the petri dish of life and just keep on executing, stir it up. And he's like, and all of a sudden people say, oh, you got lucky. And you're like, really?
Yeah. It takes 20 years to become an overnight success sometimes.
Yeah.
And that's the challenging part too, because then the entrepreneurial dentist that's doing clinical 4 or 5 days a week doesn't understand how to do it, thinks you got lucky, and feels that they're unlucky, and it's a very lonely place.
Let me break down. I only said two of them, so let me just talk about them real quickly. So luck would be like winning the lottery. You got lucky, right? His second thing is what I just said: taking chances, learning, executing, and then the third one is developing specific knowledge, right? So the example he gives a lot is if you're the only person who can do underwater sea recovery, right, in the Caribbean, and someone finds a buried ship, they will call you out of, and all of a sudden you are lucky because you're the person who has that specific knowledge. So I wanted to close the loop on that because I only gave 2.
Right. But then you could iterate that into dentistry. So let's take the solo dentist, right? Who aspires to become a dental business owner, meaning have a practice that makes money when they're not practicing. Typical path is they get specific knowledge. They become the all-on-X surgeon that can do it all because they realize they get out of school, fillings can only generate, $300,000 of production collection per year. Let me do quadrant. Okay, I can do $1 million with some quadrant, some Invisalign. But then how do I make more money? Oh, let me become an all-on-X provider. Mm-hmm. And now I can do $1.5, $2 million a year in collection. And now I got to get an associate. So now you can't find your replacement. So you got wealthy by specific knowledge. And Naval, I know this is like the Naval podcast now, but Naval has tweeted repeatedly, if you have to have a degree to do your job, you will never get really rich. Because that means it's you as an architect. If it's you're the architect, they want you. If you're the all-on-X provider, they want you. What are you going to do? Like in between like all-on-X surgeries, go out and like meet like associates and mentor associates. So while you're doing your all-on-X, they're like screwing up a quadrant next door and then you have to fix it all. It's very difficult.
It really is. And and I guess whenever you get that specific, we talk about this a lot in, I don't know if it's mastermind or you and I, but like always assume that patients don't know when you obtain that specific knowledge, Greg, assume that no one knows you do that. Assume no one knows that you're taking new patients. Assume that no one knows you do Botox. Assume nothing when you talk to a patient because you'll be shocked with I didn't know you were accepting new patients, or I didn't even know you did that, right? Don't become, I used to make fun of my buddy. I was like, you're the most well-guarded secret in this. No one knows you're doing it, right? So don't do that either. I know that we kind of evolved or devolved in this conversation but I think it's all in the same vein of being uneffable. How are we going to put that on a title? Be unf-withable?
Yeah. How to become unf-withable. Yeah.
All right. Well, let's wrap it. I think that was good. I think when someone sees a 22-minute pod from us, they'll be like, I'll listen to that one. That's easy.
This will be the first one I listen to.
Yeah.
I can invest 20 minutes in these jackasses.
See ya.
Thanks, guys.